episode of What's Happening Now with Laura. If you would recall at the beginning of this month, March, I did inform you that being that International Women's Day being celebrated on the 8th of March, and well, it's a custom that I've picked up for the last 2 years that I would be bringing to you every week for the month of March. A woman for excellence. A woman who, by her very attitude, her very composure, her very behavior, whether it's professional, whether it's domestic, whether it's community-wise, I will be bringing to you a woman that I think that St. Lucia needs to be paying attention to, and that we need to commend for her hard work and dedication to our nation, to herself, to children, to community as a whole, to St. Lucia. This evening, I want to present to you a teacher, principal, and it's someone that I've recently gotten in my radar, but it's someone that I think is commendable. I think someone who has taken her vocation very, very seriously in the 40 years that she was a teacher and subsequently a principal, and given the best of herself to her students, to her school, to her community. I speak of none other than Miss Paula St. Luce, past principal of the Grosley Primary School. I first heard the name Paula St. Luce this year, last month, while we were celebrating our 40th independence anniversary. Miss Paula St. Luce was commended and awarded the St. Lucia Le Piton Medal Gold for her exemplary contributions to education. Now, I would have loved to have Miss St. Luce here in studio to have a chat with her and the challenges and the highlights of her career, but unfortunately Miss St. Luce is down with the flu. You know, that flu which is going around, and you would have heard me being very, very stuffy the last couple of weeks recovering from that very flu, and I'm sounding a little bit more like myself this evening. Thank God for that, because it's no easy thing, and I'm grateful that I didn't have it as bad as others, but I digress. I would have loved to have her, but she's down with the flu, and so she's unable to be in studio with me. So, in lieu of that, I will read to you her citation as she received for long and meritorious service in the field of education, sports, and youth development, the Le Piton Gold. Miss Paula St. Luce is from the community of Grosley, where she has given over 40 years of service as a teacher and then principal at the Grosley Infant and Primary Schools, respectively. She entered the teaching service in 1977 and retired in January 2019. She recommenced the Girl Guides movement in Grosley by setting up the 4th Grosley Girl Guide company with over 80 young girls. She later became the commissioner in the movement and represented St. Lucia in the International Girl Guide meetings in England and Mexico. Miss St. Luce is also a sports enthusiast and was instrumental in forming the Masad Stars netball team. She secured uniforms for the Grosley volleyball team and accompanied both teams to tournaments and training camps. Her biggest accomplishment in sports was championing the cause for a multi-purpose court to be built in Grosley. Even before turning 60, and you would not believe she doesn't look a day over 40, she was responsible for identifying athletes for the club's 60 games that were held annually. She is also involved in several other community groups, including Vendors Association, Grosley Beautification Committee, counselor, shelter manager, member of the Grow Well organization, Grosley Carnival Committee, and the Events Committee for the 2020 Grosley reunion. For committing more than half her life to community service, Ms. Paula St. Luce was awarded the St. Lucia Le Piton Medal gold. Bravo, Miss St. Lucie. But despite all of the accolades and wonderful words of commendation and citation read a moment ago, this is not what really got me to take note of Miss St. Lucie. You see, it is not often that you hear glowing words of teachers and principals. Yeah, we hear a lot about our teachers. A lot of us can talk about teachers in the past and in the present who are perhaps doing a good job, who have impacted our lives, whether positively or negatively. But it is not often that I stop and take note. It is not often that I hear of a teacher who listened to her students and actually implemented without waiting to be told to do so a policy, whether long-term, long-lived or short-lived, to change the behaviors of students and teachers alike. Now, you must be wondering, what is she talking about? I am certain most of you, if not all of you, are aware of the raging debate going on due to the abolition of corporal punishment. And to hear some people speak, it's almost as if they're hearing it for the first time. That they were never aware, that it never entered their minds that corporal punishment would one day be abolished. And through speaking to people, one name kept coming back and back and back again and again and again as to one principal who dabbled in abolishing corporal punishment at her school, despite it being legal and constitutionally authorized on our books. And that person is Miss Paula St. Lucie. And I'm not saying that there aren't other principals who may have done the same, but her name kept coming up over and over. As a matter of fact, I think her name is the only name that kept coming up. There were other schools other than the Gros Islet Primary School that was mentioned as well, but for some reason, Miss St. Lucie's initiative struck a chord with several people, and for that I commend her. I spoke with Miss St. Lucie yesterday, and I asked her about her involvement in abolishing corporal punishment at the Gros Islet Primary School. And she informed me that though stopping corporal punishment at the school was short-lived, because I do believe that the students, the teachers and the principals do use corporal punishment today as a last resort at the Gros Islet Primary School. But a young student, at the time I think he was attending the Corinth Secondary School, but he is a past alumni of the Gros Islet Primary School. And in competing in the, I think, secondary school Calypso competition in 2015, he sang a song entitled Corporal Punishment. And the words of that song struck such a deep chord with Miss St. Lucie that she engaged her teachers in trying to find other means of disciplining children at her school. Let's take a listen to that song which struck such a deep chord with Miss St. Lucie. And after hearing the song, we'll be right back into the meat of our discussion this evening. To beat or not to beat. Take a listen. Corporal Punishment by Mighty G. When a man beats his woman, everybody does bawl. Nobody will tolerate it, but spare the rod and spoil the child is the license to give us blows from the mouths of babes. As I said earlier, most of you, if not all of you, must be aware of the raging debate that is going on now since the Ministry of Education sent out this circular that effective 1st of May, corporal punishment in schools will be suspended to be eventually abolished come 1st of May 2020. And we have heard immense debate, arguments for and against corporal punishment in schools, and some of the loudest, most vociferous proponents for it to remain in schools, or at least to get some consultation on whether it should be abolished or what alternative forms of punishment should be administered in lieu of corporal punishment. And none have been more vociferous than the TUF and the Principals Association, Teachers Union Federation and the Principals Association. And St. Lucia, my heart fell when I heard this. My heart literally fell. Let's listen to the president of the Teachers Union Federation, Mr. Julian Monrose, as he laments on the lack of consultation on alternative forms of punishment for children.
However, for us, the difficulty is with the fact that there was no consultation, that teachers were not prepared. Corporal punishment has been part of the school system in St. Lucia from inception. If you're going to withdraw it, ideally, you would want to put things in place. Give the teachers, because you are withdrawing one method of punishment, you would want to give the teachers skills, training in alternative forms of.
Sorry about that, St. Lucia. I have been just corrected on something that I just said a minute ago, and I think I said Monrose is the president of the TUF. I'm so sorry about that. It's not the TUF, it's the SLTU, which is the St. Lucia's Teachers Union. So thank you very much about that, which is why I love this show. It's so interactive. But it's getting a little too interactive for me because I lost hearing in my earpiece. So hopefully we can get that corrected. So yes, so what you just heard is the the president of the St. Lucia Teachers Union, and lamenting the abolition of corporal punishment in schools and the lack of consultation to alternative forms of punishment. And I keep using the word, and you hear me stressing the word punishment. And I'm not sure if you counted, I couldn't hear to count for you, with you, the number of times that Mr. Monrose said the word punishment. That corporal punishment has been a part of the school system from inception. And that corporal punishment should not be abolished without alternative forms of punishment. Punishment. And I don't know about you, but for me, it grates on my nerves every time I hear Mr. Monrose talks about corporal punishment and alternative forms of punishment. And he stresses punishment. You know, many people use discipline and punishment interchangeably, but for me and for the greater world out there, the two are not synonymous. And for you, it should not be synonymous either. Let me give you a definition for discipline and a definition for punishment. Accepted definitions for discipline and punishment. Discipline is the practice of training someone to behave in accordance with rules or a code of behavior. Discipline is the practice of training someone to behave in accordance with rules or a code of behavior. Training someone. The word discipline comes from the Latin disciplina, which means teaching, learning, or instruction. And discipulus, which means disciple, pupil. To discipline, therefore, means to teach. To teach is to show and explain how to do something. It focuses on teaching the desirable future behavior. So, for instance, if your child at home, parents, that's for you as well, or your student at school exhibits a certain behavior pattern or does something which is not tolerated or accepted in society, your job as parent and teacher is to teach the child the acceptable behavior and to discipline that child, I guess, over time, what to expect or the desirable behavior that you would like that child to exhibit. Now, to punish is a different thing. To punish is to inflict suffering for past behavior. Inflict suffering. Inflict suffering. I am certain a lot of you may have heard that old adage, if you cannot hear, you will feel. There are various ways to interpret if you cannot hear, you will feel, but for most of us growing up, it means that your skin will feel it literally. You will feel. A lot of us parents and teachers, we ask a child to stop a particular behavior without explaining to that child why the behavior is not accepted and what is the better behavior that is expected in a certain circumstance. Rather, we ask a child not to do something. Don't do this. Don't do that. I remember one time asking a child not to do something and going through the motions of explaining why. And that child's parent was around and said to me, "Uka explique ba iti mamay la puchi pasi po se fesa me se wuki gwa muna explique ti mamay la upani pièce explique ka explique ba pièce ti mamay debu di pa fe bagay si po se pa fe." And I was aghast. This was the parent. This was the parent saying to me, the teacher, not to explain to the child why. I then further went on to ask the parent, if I don't tell the child why she wasn't supposed to do something, what did she expect to happen? Hey, may expect it perfect, but Saudi perfect. I said, and when I'm not there, what do you expect? What do you think is going to happen? Well, me connectly tell me a better ikai. I said, but if you don't explain to the child why she shouldn't do what I've asked her not to do, she doesn't understand why. When I'm there, she won't do it, but when I'm not there, she will do it. That child now will grow up and leave school and enter the workforce. And while at the workforce, the boss says, you aren't supposed to do A, B, C. And while the boss is around, she won't do A, B, C, because she has been taught to be obedient and to listen to when the boss says don't do this, or the person in charge says don't do this, or the authority figure says don't do this. She won't do it. But what happens when the boss is not around? And if those of you listening have been in any supervisory or management position, you will understand where I am coming from. Invariably, this is where the unethical behavior comes in, because ethics is doing the right thing despite nobody being around to see you do it, or nobody being around to ask you to do it. That is what ethics in a nutshell is. So when the boss is around, you will exhibit the behavior that the boss expects. But when the boss is not around, you're going to do what you want to do anyway, because you haven't been taught. You do not have the skills to understand that there are consequences for every action. So, back to corporal punishment. So when a child goes to school and the child does not follow the rules, invariably, the first thing that happens is a ruler, a whip, a strap, a paddle, some implement is used to punish that child for not following the rules, to punish the child. I remember as a child growing up, going to primary school, any teacher in any school, in any class, didn't have to be your homeroom teacher or your grade teacher or your standard teacher, because in my time we didn't have grades, it was standards. We had standard 1 through to 6. So your standard teacher would be the one to inflict that punishment. Since then, in 1990, contained within the 1999 Act, the Teachers Act, it states that only principals, vice principals, and other teachers authorized to do so by the principal are authorized to beat a child. But is that enough? So there you see, moving from prior to 1999, where any teacher could have beat any child with impunity, a shift, a paradigm shift, a clear indication that the authority, the powers that be, recognize that there needs to be some boundaries for corporal punishment inflicted in schools. Inflicted in schools. So they moved from any teacher being able to whip any child to only the principals and the vice principals being authorized, and in lieu of the principal or the vice principal, a teacher authorized to do so or left in charge by the principal. So there was a shift from any teacher to just this small box of teachers. In my mind, I'm thinking there is a clear shift to the eventual abolition of corporal punishment. So it flummoxes me to understand why Mr. Monrose would say that sufficient consultation was not had with teachers and principals to give them the additional skills with which to punish, not to discipline, to punish children. And if there is anybody listening to the sound of my voice or seeing me right now on television, if you're honest with yourself, you will know, you would have had experience, whether it is personal or from a third person looking in, experience a teacher beating a child so badly she's crawled under a desk begging, pleading, begging for that teacher to stop. I won't do it. I won't do it. I promise. I promise. And they're under that desk or that bench in the classroom, licking that child down. Licking that child down. And that child now has to leave school, be tormented by other pupils at that school, and go home and face the music with welts all over her body or his body, with bruise marks the following day, black and blue, because some teachers and the principals could not contain their rage while inflicting that suffering on that child, punishing the child for minor infractions such as coming to school late. There was one particular child, one particular student in my class, and on a daily basis I had to keep those tears in on a daily basis, to the point where a cabal of us used to try to we used to look out for that girl. I went to an all-girls school, by the way, so a lot of the examples I'm going to give are based on girls, a girl situation, because, you know, I will tend to bias towards girls because I went to an all-girls primary school. And we would look out for that girl when she's coming to school. Invariably she was late. We don't know why she was late. And I don't think any teacher ever asked her why she was late. But her, there were three of them. There was a younger sister who was in the infant school at the time, and the two older girls were at the primary school. But these two girls used to come to school late, and that one that was in my class was very sensitive. And even before she hit the gate, tears would be streaming down her face because she knew she would get the strap. And so a few of us, we used to watch out for her and try to hide her, you know, so that she could come in and nobody would notice that she's late, to avoid her getting those straps. And I remember one day she was late for school. She and her sister, her older sister. And the sister got caught. And she got, I'm not sure how many lashes with that belt. And that child, that student, vowed not to be the only one to get licks that day. And we had hidden her sister. She had gotten in. She was seated in the class. Her books were out. We'd even written notes for her, passed it on. She was copying that already because school was already going on. And she said to the principal that day, "But look, my sister is late. Why am I the only one getting licks?" And the principal hauled that child out of class and beat that child. And I sat there helpless and I cried because I could hear her screaming. I could hear her screaming. And some of you might be thinking that was, oh, way, whenever you were a child at primary school and that happened. That happened to my mother as well. In my mother's days, while she was a student at school, children were getting beat that badly, if not worse. My mother is at least 25 years older than I am. And that happened while she was a student. It happened while I am a student. And I'm telling you, as God is my witness, as I have a day to die and you have a day to die, this is happening today. This is happening today at our schools, where students are being bit within an inch of their lives and they go home black and blue because the licks that they got at school, that's not discipline. That was inflicting pain and punishment and suffering on a child. That happens today, 2019. I am certain a child got bit in school today. Oh, my bad. There was no school today because some teachers decided that they weren't coming to school for whatever the reason was. I don't know if there was something in the air on Monday when they went to the teachers' meeting, but from what I understand, some schools were closed because teachers didn't come to school. You know, negotiating for salaries, but that's for another show. It irks me and drives me up a wall to hear the president of the St. Lucia Teachers Union saying that teachers are not consulted and that they have no other means of disciplining, of punishing children, punishing children, and that they are helpless, they don't know what to do. But mind you, if you have a child, you will hear ever so often that child coming home and telling you there'll be no school tomorrow because teachers are having a career development day. What happens during those career development days? It begs the question, do teachers read? Do teachers develop themselves after leaving Teachers College? Is what they learn at Teachers College the be-all and end-all of teaching? Those who have BScs in education, do they ever crack open a book other than the subject area that they're proficient in to learn alternative methods of teaching, of disciplining a child, of controlling and managing her or his classroom? Do principals further develop themselves? And a lot of principals today are holders of master's degrees. I think that's one of the requirements to become a principal. X number of years as a teacher, BSc, master's degree, management experience. It begs the question, do teachers and principals further develop themselves? Or is it that they expect the Ministry of Education to continuously train them in their field, in their chosen vocation? You know, when I go to work, when I used to be working for people, and I go to work and I am employed as a brand manager or as a marketing specialist or whatever the title is, and I'm given responsibility over certain products or brands, and I go out there and I read up and I see what's happening, the trends happening in the world. I don't go to my boss and say, what do you want me to do now that certain restrictions have been placed on certain items? My boss will look at me as if I'm crazy. I am supposed to be well read enough to see trends developing, to know that if something has affected St. Vincent, Jamaica, Trinidad, Antigua, Dominica, but has yet to arrive in St. Lucia, that it's only a matter of time before it's trending in St. Lucia. And it is my responsibility as the professional to anticipate those coming issues and to deal with it and to come up with a work plan to deal with it. Otherwise, why am I there? And to my mind, that is what is supposed to happen with teachers. Teachers and principals are supposed to develop themselves. Can you imagine starting at one level and ending your career at that same level? You know, today I was going through, I don't often go through Facebook, but somebody sent me on a mission and I went through Facebook, and there was a former educator, still an educator, but in a different light, saying that, asking for people to comment on, and I'm paraphrasing because I closed the page, but asking, why is it that at Teachers College, if you mention corporal punishment as a form of disciplining or correcting a behavior, you failed? And another person comes up and says, oh, that's a lie, that it's a part of the whole process, but it's a last resort. Well, a last resort oftentimes will become a no resort. And the reason why it is a last resort, there's a reason for that. There is a reason for that. A last resort. It is not first resort, it is last resort, and last resorts are often the first to go out the window. first to go out the window. And I can remember one of my nieces coming home and telling me, you know, I think she must have been about 8 or 9, and telling me, Auntie, you know, I peed a little bit on me today at school. I said, what? Why? Didn't you feel like you wanted to pee? Why did you go to the bathroom? Why didn't you ask the teacher to allow you? She said, no, but it's the teacher that caused me to pee myself a little bit. And I said, why? She said, because she was calling students up to the front to recite the times table. I think it was the 9 timetables. And there were children who couldn't do it, and she was saying, if you cannot do it, she'll beat you. And so she was afraid that her turn would come up. I said, but don't you know your 9 times? She said, of course I do, but I don't want to get beat. Auntie, you don't beat me. Daddy doesn't beat me. Mommy doesn't beat me. Grandma doesn't beat me. So I didn't want the teacher to beat me. So I was scared. I was so scared. I was shaking, and I was saying my times table, and in my mind I'm saying, please don't forget, please don't forget. And in the process, I peed myself a little bit. That is what corporal punishment does to our students. It teaches them fear. It doesn't teach them to learn. Whomever tells you that, they're stupid. And tell them I said so. They're stupid. Any teacher who uses corporal punishment as a weapon or as a skill set to teach students is a stupid teacher who does not need, who does not deserve to be in the vocation. Tell them I say so. Any teacher, bar none, who uses corporal punishment, and I repeat, any teacher who uses corporal punishment as a tool, as a skill to teach, is a stupid person and needs to be fired from the profession. You don't use corporal punishment to teach. Corporal punishment does not teach anybody anything except to fear. You fear going to school, you fear the teacher, you hate school, and eventually what do? You play truant and you don't come to school. I went to school with a number of girls on a daily basis who'd leave their homes with a packed lunch and a full school bag and never see one day, not 1 minute, not 1 second of a classroom. Because they know invariably they would get to school and something would go wrong and they would get licks. And then they would have to go home, and before they got home, their parents already knew that they got beat in school and they would get beat again. And so they would not go to school. Invariably they would still get licks because the teacher would tell the parents that they didn't come to school, but at least they only got licks once. That's the justification for not going to school. And then we wonder why our children weren't learning anything. First of all, they cannot learn anything because all that's in their mind is fear. All that's in their mind is fear. Second of all, you teach them fear by threatening them. Who does that? Who does that? You know, I was listening to another program on a radio show, and there was this popular lawyer. Everybody knows him. He was the president of the Law Association, or the Lawyers Association in St. Lucia at one point. I'm not sure if he still is. And he was saying that he was expelled from school, from St. Mary's College, because he refused to take cane. Because whatever he was accused of doing, he hadn't done it, and refused to take cane on a matter of principle, and was expelled from school. And as a result, that drove him to ensure that his own children did not go to a school where corporal punishment was administered. He eventually had to send his children to private school because there's not one public school in St. Lucia, not one at the time, that did not believe in corporal punishment or did not administer without apology. What are we doing to our children? We heard it from Mighty J. We heard it from Mighty J, where he says, when a man beats his woman, nobody stands for that. Nobody stands for that, but we feel that we must beat children in school so that they can learn appropriate behavior. Well, here's what you teach a boy when you beat him, or a girl when you beat her at school, to learn something. You teach them to fear you. You teach them to fight, or you teach them to become cowards. And when I say cowards, I don't mean like, I mean like you're just not going to stand up for yourself. That's what you teach children when you beat them in school, because they ain't learning nothing. They're not learning anything. So shame on you, Mr. Monrose, for saying we are helpless as teachers because we have no skill set. Of all these years you've been a principal, all of these years you've been a teacher at school, you have no skill set other than punishing children at school? Other than punishing children at school. Let me tell you something, Mr. Monrose. Let me tell you something, Mr. Monrose. Discipline in schools. There are four, as far as I'm concerned, 4 reasons for disciplining in any setting, whether it's at school, at home, at work, or in the community. It is to modify a person's behavior. In this case, we're talking children. So it is to modify the children's behavior. It is to develop their character. It is to protect their mental health, because yes, corporal punishment affects a child's mental health. And it is to help you, the teacher, you, the parent at home, to develop a close relationship with the child. It is to modify the child's behavior, it is to develop their character, it is to protect their mental health, and it is to help you develop a close relationship. Now, I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with a child. You keep telling the child, don't do this. Mommy doesn't like you to do this, because when you do this, this is what happens. And the child continues to do it, and you don't give them a spank on their hand or on their bum, on their leg, and say, I said stop it. To emphasize, that's not what I'm talking about. Because if that was what was happening in schools, I think a lot more children would enjoy going to school. And there is also a reason why a certain class, and I put it that way because I want to underscore a point here. There's a certain class of children who get licks at school. I experienced it. If you Mr. So-and-so's daughter or Mrs. So-and-so's son, you don't get beat at school. If a teacher is your parent, you don't get beat at school. A principal is your parent, you don't get beat at school. I have experienced that for myself. That child can exhibit any kind of wayward behavior, and there's always an excuse. There's always a way to pacify and to placate and to sweep that under the rug. But just let Mr. So-and-so's son from the ghetto, whose mother is an alcoholic and whose father does not take care of him, let that child misbehave. Let that child say a swear word in school. Let that child don't come to school with a pencil or without their homework. Just you wait and see. And it's licks for so. We heard it in Mighty J's song. I have to get licks from my mother, licks from my father, and I have to get licks at school. And we wonder why our children today are violent. And they strike back. And they lick down the teachers in the school, and all teachers hands up, they're afraid, and they say it's because they took away their rights to discipline, to punish, and to inflict suffering on these children. That is why the children are the way they are? Heck no. It is because you inflict suffering, punishment, and pain that is illegal in St. Lucia to administer to an adult. So you, as an adult who has committed an egregious act and is sent to prison, cannot get licks in prison. You have done something illegal against and contrary to the laws of this land, and you cannot get licks. If anybody were to touch you, Mary Frances on the case. Yes, human rights. But children don't have human rights. We can lick them down how we want because we are the boss. And I'll tell you something else. A lot of these teachers, they get abused at home themselves. They come to school with all their wives. They can't tolerate their children. They cannot discipline their children. They cannot reason with their husbands or their wives. And then they come to school and a child will speak out of turn, or a child will say something when they're supposed to be writing, and you want to rain licks on them. Paisia, not anymore. Bravo, Ministry of Education. As far as I'm concerned, that was too long in coming. Too long in coming. Way too long in coming. And these teachers have a year to understand themselves and to bring forth. You know, I was speaking to Miss St. Luce and her brother. Hi, guys. It was wonderful speaking with you, and I got so much insight. And I was asking them, why is it not that teachers and principals, you know, before I go there, the way I look at it, teachers are supposed to be the eyes and the ears of principals in the classroom, because the principal can be in every class. Poor job, some of these principals have so much work to do. You know, they've got so much administrative work, and the bigger the school, the more the administrative work that they have to do. I feel sorry for some of them sometimes. So they can't be in every class all the time. So the teachers are the eyes and the ears of the principals. And so they're supposed to carry back and say, you know, there's this child, all of a sudden, he starts stealing lunch money, or he starts stealing the children's lunch, or he's behaving this way, or she's behaving that way. There's a child, all of a sudden, she's become very promiscuous. Why is it we cannot pull these children out of class and have a conversation with them? Most schools have one counselor, and in some of these bigger schools with thousands of students, one counselor to deal with all of that. Is that right? So why can't the teachers now carry back to the principals, because they're the eyes and the ears, what's happening in the classroom and suggestions as to how to fix it? And the principals, being the mouthpiece for the school, reports that back to the ministry and say, ministry, I don't think we should continue with corporal punishment in schools. Here's what I think we should do. When I go through my career development and when I read through best practices in schools, this is what I see, and I think we can implement some of those things. I think we can implement some of those things in the school. Don't implement it school-wide, but let me just try it in one classroom, and then we can roll it out in the school, and if it works in the school, then we can roll it out at various schools. Well, I was speaking to some other principals, and from what I understand, there's something called child-friendly schools. And some of these principals, some of these teachers have been advocating for that. Where Mr. Monrose does not. If some of the teachers and some of the principals know about it, who disagree with Mr. Monrose, I don't know if he knows that there are teachers and principals who disagree with him, but there are teachers and principals who disagree with him. If they know about child-friendly schools, how come he doesn't know? And in the child-friendly schools spectrum, it delineates various ways to discipline, to teach a child good behavior that does not include inflicting pain and suffering on a child. So if they know, how come he doesn't know? How come if they know, how come he doesn't know? I'm going to take a pause for now, and I want you to listen to the president of the Principals Association to hear what she has to say about consultation.
I am still wondering why the rush, and I think what really triggered this press conference is the fact that at our annual Principals Conference that was held on the 28th of February and the 1st of March, the minister indicated that there was consultation with both the St. Lucia Teachers Union and the National Principals Association regarding the abolition of corporal punishment. And as I said previously, this consultation has not taken.
Now, if we hear her, she says that the minister said that there was consultation and that this consultation has not yet taken place. But let me read something through to you. And I'm not sure about the consultation that was supposed to happen before the abolition, but I, in my research, came across certain things that speaks of consultation since 2015 with regard to abolition of corporal punishment. The legality and practice of corporal punishment, and I'm reading this verbatim from Corporal Punishment of Children in St. Lucia, briefing for the Universal Periodic Review, 23rd session, 2015. And that is from an organization, Global Initiative to End All Corporal Punishment of Children. The legality and practice of corporal punishment of children violates their fundamental human rights to respect for human dignity and physical integrity and to equal protection under the law. Under international human rights law, the Convention on the Rights of the Child and other human rights instruments states have an obligation to enact legislation to prohibit corporal punishment in all settings, including the home. In St. Lucia, corporal punishment of children is lawful despite repeated recommendations to prohibit it by the Committee on the Rights of the Child and recommendations to prohibit made during the first cycle of the UPR of St. Lucia, which the government rejected. Now, let me continue before I dissect that. We hope the working group will note with concern the legality of corporal punishment of children in St. Lucia. We hope states will raise the issue during the review in 2015 and make a specific recommendation that St. Lucia prohibit all corporal punishment of children in all settings, including the home, and repeal the right to administer reasonable punishment in the Children and Young Persons Act in 1972. But as I said, in 1999, the Education Act says that only principals and teachers and vice principals can be children. Review of the St. Lucia in reverse St. Lucia in the first cycle UPR 2011 and progress since then. St. Lucia was reviewed in the first cycle of the Universal Periodic Review in 2011. Session 10, in its national report, the government stated that corporal punishment is part of the culture. Violence is part of our culture, and that prohibiting it in schools and eradicating it in the family is a formidable challenge. It is near impossible to eradicate violence in our schools. And I am paraphrasing, because I gave you the definition of punishment and discipline. So we're inflicting pain, right? It is near impossible to eradicate inflicting pain in schools. But that there had been progress in phasing out its use in schools. The issue of corporal punishment was raised in the compilation of the UN information and the summary of stakeholders' information during the review. The following recommendations were made. Review its existing legislation to fully reflect the principles and provisions of CRC, especially in relation to non-discrimination, corporal punishment, and juvenile justice. That came from Guatemala. That was rejected by St. Lucia. Take all necessary steps to eliminate corporal punishment. That came from Germany, rejected by St. Lucia. Increase efforts to ban corporal punishment from schools, coming from Costa Rica, rejected. Prohibit all forms of corporal punishment of children in all settings, Slovenia, rejected. Amend the legislation to explicitly prohibit corporal punishment in families, schools, and institutions, to conduct awareness-raising campaigns on this issue, and to ensure that the existing legislation related to children fully reflects the principles and provisions contained in CRC from Italy, rejected. And it goes on and on and on and on and on and on about possible ameliorations to corporal punishment in school against children, and that all of them were rejected. United Nations Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner, Committee on Rights of Child examined report of St. Lucia, 6th of June 2014. That's another report. The Committee on the Rights of the Child today considered the combined 2nd to 4th periodic report of St. Lucia on its implementation of the provisions of the Convention of the Rights of the Child. Presenting the report, Alvina Reynolds, Minister for Health, Wellness, Human Services and Gender Relations, and the Director of Human Services of St. Lucia, said that St. Lucia was committed to using its limited resources for the protection of all children on its territory. A major development had been the formation of the National Action Child Protection Committee, with its main objectives to monitor the country's implementation of the convention and to act as an advisory body on child protection matters. In the interactive dialogue, committee experts were particularly interested in the prevalence of corporal punishment in St. Lucia, suggesting that it be clearly prohibited throughout central legislation. They wanted to know more about the functioning of the Child Protection Committee and asked whether the Office of the Ombudsman for Children's Rights had been established. Ms. Reynolds said that she was minister for the first time and was very committed to the protection of children and the breaking of barriers. She said that she had a very strong, dedicated team and was working on synergy among various government agencies. The delegation would take into consideration all suggestions and best practices. The delegation was leaving Geneva reinvigorated and with renewed energy to work even harder on ensuring that children were protected and felt protected. The delegation for St. Lucia included representatives of the Ministry of Health, Wellness, Human Services and Gender Relations. In September 2012, the Cabinet of Ministers had approved the National Action Child Protection Committee with its main objectives to monitor the country's implementation of the convention and to act as an advisory body on child protection matters. The committee, which met once a month, also advocating and coordinating action on behalf of children. One of the main goals was the development of a national plan of action for children. The state party was also working closely with partners such as UNICEF and USAID on a number of child protection and juvenile justice matters and activities. In March 2013, a national consultation had been held on the theme, The Future We Want, which discussed the abolition of corporal punishment and included a wide cross-section of adults and students from various schools. Now, I'll stop here because there's so much more. And you have been sending me your WhatsApp, and I want to get to those WhatsApps in a minute, in those WhatsApp messages in a minute. Let me go over this again, this last bit. In March 2013, a national consultation had been held on the theme The Future We Want, which discussed the abolition of corporal punishment. So my question is, when these ministers go across to Geneva and to Japan and Europe and Kazakhstan and all of those places, I know I mispronounced that word, but I am so furious. When they go across to all of those places, Switzerland and Sweden and all these places, on these conventions, and they participate and they say that they have these invigorating and well-placed team to do these things, when they come back, do they consult or do they just take that and say, whatever, your money I wanted, I just wanted to travel, and just chuck that on a shelf? And do the principals and teachers question when persons go out there on their behalf to find out best practices, what took place? When these persons in authority go out there and say that a national consultation had been held, who is lying? Is the minister lying, saying that they had a national consultation? Or is it that the principals are lying when they say they had never been consulted? Or are they just referring to 2019 that they had not been consulted? And we know that teachers have lamented time and time again that too many times they are hauled out of a classroom, and principals have complained that they're hauled out of school to attend these committee meetings and to attend this conference pala, and nothing comes out of it. So when you have been consulted in the past, and we're just assuming that the minister was not lying when she said there was a national consultation, when you were consulted in the past, does that not account for anything? And when corporal punishment was removed from the ambit of any teacher to just principals and vice principals, were you not aware of the writing on the wall that eventually that there would be an abolition of corporal punishment in schools? And when the whole world is talking about abolishing corporal punishment, not just in schools, but on a community level, and I heard Mr. Monroe's mention some time ago that we're asking, or the ministry is asking for abolition of corporal punishment in schools, but on a community level, it's still there. I'm telling Mr. Monroe, if he does not watch television and he doesn't listen to the radio, something is certainly wrong with him because he's not aware of what's happening. Because I know for a fact that there have been PSAs put out by OECS and other organizations, USAID being one of them, to ask parents to discipline their children rather than punish them and inflict suffering and pain on them, and to abolish corporal punishment. So if it is happening on a community level where we're trying to infiltrate the homes and to get parents to understand, appreciate, and recognize the need for alternative forms of discipline, how come you in the school with all your illuminaries don't know? How come the principals of some schools recognize and have already implemented and rolled out CFS, and the president of the Principals Association is not aware and has not been consulted? Is it that the principals are doing their own thing in their own schools and not passing that information out to the president of the Principals Association? In which case, the indictment is not on the principals, but on the president, because you are not aware of what your principals are doing. Because if some know, how come all don't know? And if the writing is on the wall for some, how come it's not on the wall for all? The indictment is not on Ministry of Education. You know, too many times we have this slave mentality where we expect top bottom. We expect the head to thrust down our throats what we're supposed to do, and we are the ones who are in the trenches on the ground, and we're not feeding the information up. And if we're not feeding the information, or if we are feeding the information up, how come we only hear your voices when ministry says something that you are not pleased with? Because of lack of consultation. My foot. It is illegal in this country, and the world knows it. UNICEF writes about it all the time. It is illegal for corporal punishment to be administered to adults, but you want to administer it to students. Now I heard Mr. Monroe lamenting that children bring guns to school and weapons and knives and scissors, and they can't deal with that, and we want to take away their only form of punishment. Is it any wonder that children bring guns and knives to school? And if I am a teacher in a classroom and a child brings a gun to school, you think I'm going to look for the principal to get out his strap to punish that child for bringing a gun? You have a gun, I have a strap. Does that make sense? Do you hear yourself when you speak? Does that make sense to you? Does that make any kind? A child comes to school with a gun, a knife, a pair of scissors to inflict harm and pain, and your only recourse, hands up, I'm so helpless, I have to beat that child into submission. That child is past submission. That child is crying out for help on a higher level. Licks corrige him when he was in infant school. It corrige him when he was in primary school. It ain't gonna corrige him when he's in secondary school. Believe me, you. And if we do not take the time to understand where our children, our students are coming from, is it any wonder? Is it any wonder? You know, there are three things that a person does when they feel threatened. They fight. You know, it's the 3 F's: fight, fright, or flight. They protect themselves. They run away, and we see it under the children run under the desk. They run out of the classrooms. They do all kind of willy-nilly. Or they retaliate and they fight back. And then we say our children are not good. We say our children are not good. But there are so many other positive reinforcements to use. And it's too bad that I won't be able to go through them. And I'm going to have part 2 of this next week to identify for you, the principals and the teachers out there who are unaware. I'm not a teacher, I'm not a principal, but I can tell you methods and things to use to help you discipline a child, to help you teach a child good behavior rather than punish that child and inflict pain on that child. Because yes, the child will not do what the child should not do at the moment that you are there. But what happens when you are not there? And can we blame the men who beat upon their women when the women don't do what they ask them to do or what they tell them to do? When all we teach them is if you cannot hear, you will feel. Let's go for a break. When we come back, I have a guest with me just to give a brief testimony of what licks in school did to his brain and his fear of school up to this day as an adult. Stay tuned, we'll be right back. Staying tuned, and I have tons of WhatsApp messages. The lines are open for 4519788. The WhatsApp platform is 284-6536, and you can send me your emails. I'm not sure if I'll be able to get through with it, but I promise next week we will continue because there's so much more to delve into. So much more to delve into. Right now, I want to introduce you to a dear friend, somebody who means a lot to me. This person has helped me grow so much in the last few months, in the last year. And it pains me to know that we may not have experienced or not have known this young, fine, exemplary man and the damage that corporal punishment has done to him. Welcome, Carlos. Now, most of you know Carlos as this young entrepreneur, this young innovator who invented or developed this brine management system, solar-powered mobile desalinator used in times of calamity. But what you do, some of you may not know, is that Carlos didn't finish school. And there's a reason why he didn't finish school. Carlos, share your story.
There's one part to corporal punishment. The way it affected me was my learning. I am kind of slow when it comes to learning certain things. Say like most people can do mental arithmetic, you know, off the top of the head, very easy. Imagine going to school and with the fear of being beat because you learn differently. And the worst part was you standing in front of the blackboard, you know, ready to try and figure the sum out, and there's a teacher standing next to you with a strap.
We have a call. Just hold on there. We have a call. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Yeah, my morning will finish, but of course thing I watched from two sides. Will my morning finish?
Just quickly.
Okay. I saw two brains people dumping one another. One dumping another, two stations dumping one in a pit hole. For what? What we giving our kids? What we showing our kids? That's the only thing. I love you so much. That's why I point and I come to you, because reality is a lot. One of them didn't know exactly reality what they're doing. Thank you very much and good night.
Good night. Thank you for sharing. So you were saying?
You're welcome.
Yeah.
And there was a teacher standing next to you.
Yeah. Imagine that there's a teacher standing next to you with a strap. How could you possibly concentrate on actually working the sum? Well, most times I did not do it because I learned very slowly. You know, up to this day, well, I've told you that so many times, up to this day, I hate school. Why? I remember we had a conversation about me going back to university.
We have a call online. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Yes, good evening, Laura.
Good evening, dear.
I've been watching you for the longest while now, but tonight I had to call your shoe. What you said is very true, because I have a son and he went to school and he didn't finish his school just because of beating from a teacher. So what you said, there's a lot of people that don't know, but it is very true.
It's true.
Yes. I'm experienced of it because my son didn't finish his school just because of a teacher, because all how he used to go to school, the teacher always used to beat him, and he started give the teacher permission to beat him again, so you know what it was all about. And he left school because of that.
Thank you
That's
for
my contribution.
thank you so much for sharing. And there's so many more examples of that where parents are lamenting the fact that the child could not finish school because of a fear.
Because when you told me about, because most of my courses, you know, I do them online with the universities, and I recall you telling me, okay, why not actually go to the university? And you brought to my attention the look on my face. It was like pure fear, you know.
We have another call. Thank you for calling. You're on the air.
Yes, good evening, Laura.
Good evening, dear.
First time I call in your show.
Thank you for calling.
Because that show you have there, that's the greatest show you ever had.
Thank you.
I remember going to school, and there was a teacher. The woman was not even my teacher. The woman would stand up, you playing, she one big strap in her hand and giving you licks. Fear, you had fear. Whenever you saw that woman, everybody running. I will not mention her name. She said she was a Christian, but you standing up, you playing. Just the fear of that woman coming with that strap. You know you cannot play again? And believe you me, 20 years down the line, I met a schoolmate. And you know what he said to me? I always used to watch him in school and say, but that boy have a rage, I wonder why. As a young girl, I used to watch him and it in my mind, I not saying nothing, I watching him. 20 years down the line, I met him. You know what he said? He said to me, I remember that teacher beating us. And I made a vow. I will never beat my child. Then I said to him, I used to watch you a lot in school. I used to wonder why you had a rage. He tell me the teacher put a rage in him. And he never forgot that. And that he would never beat his children when he have children. Now you know. I telling you that. You know there's a certain teacher now presently. It is happening. And you know it bring back the memories to me. When these children see that teacher, the same thing they just do I used to do. I watching them in that certain school. And I seen them doing it too. The lady that teacher putting a fear in them too. They doing something and the same thing I used to do 20 years ago. I seen this children doing it. When they see her, they running. Anything they doing, they stopping it. And they just run. And they saying the teacher coming. You see, like long time ago, you have a long stick and you're passing it on a fence as a child and you're running. That is what the woman used to do to us. She just coming down the line on us with a long strap, like she passing it the stick on the fence the same way we used to pass on the fence with the stick as children. That's how she used to beat us. And that stay in my memory for years. And I used to wonder, what is wrong with that teacher? But you see, long time, you must have respect. And you know, none of us never talk back to her. None of us never say nothing. We never discuss it. Because we believe we had to respect her. And it's that we had to do. Whatever she did to us.
But did you really respect the teacher?
Yes, I respected her.
I mean, like, you were afraid of her, so you didn't respond to her. But in your heart, in your head, in your mind, when you see that person today, do you really respect her as a person, as a teacher?
Well, as the old years now, down the line, 20 years, no respect. But as a child, I respected her. We all respected her. We never thought of talking back, telling our parents. We never thought, that is a wrong thing she was doing. But she put fear in us for years, from infant school to primary. And some of us, she was not our teacher. But from the time we see her coming, everybody screaming and running. She coming, she coming, she coming. Whatever you're doing, you have to drop it and run for your life. But we had respect for her. Long time you couldn't talk back. We thought we were right to respect her. But as that thing come up, it's only now I check in myself. And I say, but that lady was wrong. And when the man confronted me, 20 years down the line, then I said, that's why he was always in a rage. I used to say, but that boy always upset, he always in a rage. He's 20 years down the line, he met me. And he told me that.
Thank you so much for calling and for sharing your experience. And it's unfortunate that we have persons who went through that and are still traumatized by that experience. School should be a safe haven for children. It should not be a place of fear. Thank you so much for sharing.
Okay.
And it's the same thing. And I remember the incident you're talking about very clearly. I mean, you were terrified. It was like you were so traumatized. It's like you were frozen. It was petrified is the word I'm looking for. We have a call online. Thank you for calling. You're on the air. Please turn the volume of your television down. It's creating a terrible feedback.
Good evening.
Good evening. Good evening. Your television is still too loud. It's still too loud. It's
okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Bring it all the way down.
Hello.
Bring the television all the way down. The feedback is really affecting my ear.
Yes, Laura.
Yes, that's better.
Hello.
Yes, good evening.
This is the best show I've ever heard. Listen to me. I am now 90 years. I have not stopped up to this day of thinking about my days at school. I could have been better. I could have been further. But for this teacher, she whipped me. She whipped me because of mathematics.
Yep.
I went to my mother. I told my mother, I'm being beaten at school. She said, don't worry, my dear, because she loves you. I said, love me? Okay. I went back to school. I couldn't eat. Every day I get into that house. At midday, I cannot eat lunch. I would eat lunch when I come back from school at 4 o'clock at that time. I could not eat my lunch. Went back to school. When she hit me with a strap, I said, don't do it again. You stop it, or else I'm going to bang your head with my slate. Then she never taught me again. But I learned anyway. I went to the schoolmaster for lessons. I passed my exam here at school, in private, and I went to Victoria Hospital. I did my nursing, and I passed with flying colors, working all around the island of St. Lucia as a nursing sister. From there, I went to England. I had to do my exam again, and the first question I got again, the second time, is mathematics questions. I continued my nursing, and I was finished with flying colors until I get the Queen's Medal.
Amen.
The second time, I said, no, this, I have to do some nursing tutoring. I did. I decided to send for my 2 children here. They were 9 years old. You know why I sent for them? They were in a very good home. I sent for them because they complained to me that the lady, the teacher at school was beating the child so much. She called the child the whip she was beating, she called that whip the child's name. Ha! When I got to know that in England, I wrote her a stinker. I said, if you see I come down to St. Lucia, that same whip you are taking to beat my child, I am going to beat you in the middle of the whole school. So watch it, I am coming down for you. Then I said, no, I cannot go down and make a fool of myself. I sent for my children. When the child came back to England, she said, Ma, are they going to beat me in the school? 9 years. I said, no, they don't beat in England. They will not beat you. So I sent her for math lessons, because that was what she was being beaten for. The teacher said to me, the private teacher said to me, but the child is okay. Why do you have to waste money? I said, because she was being beaten in St. Lucia for math. He said, nonsense. They cannot teach math. If they could teach math, they wouldn't say that child, they wouldn't beat her for math lessons, because she can learn math. It's the way they are teaching. When you beat a child, they will never learn, especially mathematics.
Amen.
And they are all scared of math. In my country, in India, children love math because of the way it is taught. In your St. Lucia, the teachers cannot teach math. That's why the child is so scared. And that child became working at the Department of Social Security, and she was the one distributing money for all immigrants that come to England. So she was so good at math. And that teacher used to beat her up for math, even called the rod her name.
Oh my goodness.
Glenda.
Oh my goodness.
And believe me, up to now.
That is abuse.
In fact, up to now, I'm thinking of it.
That is abuse.
So
and the sad thing about
say,
it is that these things happened so many decades ago, and in 2019 there is a debate about whether they should have been the teachers and the principals should have been consulted as to when and how to abolish corporal punishment, when so many people have been affected negatively because of corporal punishment.
I tell you,
Shame.
I really thought this form of punishment for children was abolished. At this day and age, I couldn't believe I came from England 9 years ago, and I could not believe they were still beating children at school. I'm surprised, horrified.
Yes, still beating
I am
children.
saying, if anybody hit my child at a school now, I'll go in the school and beat her back.
And this
The
is
people here are too laid back.
this is what we're trying to avoid, that kind of confrontation. And I always say violence begets violence.
That's
If
right.
you beat a child and you beat a child because you're so angry the child is not learning, that child will learn this violent behavior and apply it on the school ground, apply it at home. I've seen it so many times. Children, the way they are spoken to at school, the way they're spoken to at home, when they're on the playground, this is how they speak to their peers.
That's right.
You know? But thank you so much for sharing. It's disheartening to hear that you're 90 and you went through that, and a child today who is 9 years old is going through that same situation.
I went through
It's
it.
not fair.
It was horrific. It was horrific.
It's not
To
fair.
be at school and being beaten. You are frightened, you don't want to eat. You are crying to go back to school. Every day tears in my eyes. I don't want to go back to school. I don't want to eat my lunch until I come back at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm so scared. And they are talking about punishment, beating children at school. This is cruel. That is a sadist.
I
is
quite
sadist.
agree. I quite agree.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing.
Okay, very good show.
Thank you. Carlos, what do you think of that? I mean, does that ring a bell for you?
Yeah, it's the same maths problem, you know. And the funny thing is, it happened so long ago. Well, so, and you still have it in you. It's like the fear is still there. It doesn't go away. It's like it's trauma. It's actually trauma.
Well, I want to thank you so much for that. I wanted you to share that because you are so accomplished, and your accomplishments are because of you taking your education into your hands, because the system just wasn't working for you. I just want to run through a few messages that we received, and I know we have a ton, but we will revisit them next week, I promise. One person is saying, I remember not being beaten, but was sent out of class and had to stand in a certain location where the entire block could see me. My brother was once beaten with a tamarind branch, and he bled. His shirt got stuck on his back, and the doctor had to get involved and was offering to help to have that teacher arrested. I mean, that is so you're beating a child so much that that child is bleeding and has to be taken to the doctor. Another person says, bravo, Laura, you are exactly on point. The Education Act 1999 makes provision for abolition by the minister, and I don't know how it is that Mr. Monrose can say no consultation, and the president of the Principals Association can say no consultation. From 1999, you know that the writing is on the wall for eventual abolition. I don't understand it. It is strange that the principals are surprised that the corporal punishment is being suspended when sometime about 2007 or 2008, there was the Child Friendly School Initiative, which was piloted at schools starting with Bocage Secondary and Foasso. Looking at whole schools, for instance, the curriculum, classroom management, positive reinforcement, training of parents, etc., in an effort to change behavior. This was done in an effort towards abolishing corporal punishment. So how come you don't know, Monrose, and how come you, Madam President of the Principals Association, do not know, and you're still waiting for consultation? This damned word again, such a good word, but you have tarnished it so badly that people are beginning to hate the word consultation. You have it right, Laura. President of the Principal Association, what a disappointment. It is as if the schools are helpless without beating. Well researched. Thank you very much. Here we have a lawyer who is saying, this is, and I hope it's okay to say your name because you identified yourself. This is Levy, the lawyer, the attorney. I applaud you for calling out Julian Monrose on this issue. Shame on him. In defense of the child, I am prepared to file a constitutional motion seeking the court's declaration that corporal punishment is inhumane punishment and therefore unconstitutional. There can be no excuse or alternative to abuse. Abuse is abuse. Bravo. This is so inhumane. And to tell me you keep repeating punish, punish, punish. Where is the discipline that we're talking about? We're supposed to be disciplining students. Somebody asked me who was my favorite teacher in infant school, and I'm proud to say it was teacher Nadia. Hey, teacher Nadia, very wonderful teacher. I remember having a situation at school and she hauled me out of class. She wasn't teaching me at the time. She hauled me out of class and had stern words with me, and I've never forgotten her words. And up to this day, it is like a recurring decimal in my brain. Every time I have to react to something, I hear teacher Nadia in my head telling me, no, 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 no. There are other ways. I must have been about 5 or 6 years old. 5 or 6. And I still remember positive reinforcement. It works wonders. Somebody said, Laura, thank you so much for your show. You are a spokesperson to parents like me. I am not for beating children, especially for learning. Children have different levels of learning. Some are slower than others. There are teachers who are supposed to retire 4 years ago, and it's like they are fed up with the kindergartens. All the children get is licks and quarrel as if they are adults. My son is 5 and he already hates school. He does not want to go to school. He got 80% on his test, but he does not like the teacher because of his comments. I, as a first-time mom, spent a day at school with him, and Laura, I tell you, what the children go through in school, we would beg for homeschooling. And I'm telling you, it is so unfair. And there are so many more. I can't go through all of them. I can't even go through the emails, and there are a slew of them. I promise to get through some of them next week. And we're going to go through this child-friendly school situation. We're going to go through PBIS. We're going to go through a slew of it because I cannot believe the gall and the nerve of the president of the St. Lucia Teachers Union and the president of the Principals Association for saying that they need a consultation and that 1 year is not enough time within which to get the teachers on the straight and narrow and to understand when a lot of the teachers and principals already appreciate that corporal punishment is archaic. What is your purpose? What is your point? What is the point that you're trying to underscore here? You know, and there's this principle, this past principle of Sir Arthur Lewis. I'm not sure if he was of the entire school. I'll research that. Shame on you. Shame on you. You have yet to say one word, and I'm going to talk about it next week. You have yet to say one word about this corporal punishment nonsense, but you are busy dividing our people along petty political lines and comparing SLP with UWP and how UWP is elitist and SLP is this. You, sir, are a shame. You are a disgrace. And I'm going to talk about it more next week. You have yet to say a word to join the debate on this, and then this is what you're dividing our people along political lines. Shame on you. And I want to applaud Mr. Rowan Sion for coming out. And this is one of the schools. He was the principal of the St. Mary's College, and every boy who goes to St. Mary's College knows about the cane. And here he is saying that this corporal punishment nonsense needs to be done away with. And his school is one of the schools that was noted for the cane. I don't know any boy who has, or young man or older man or anybody who has said that they were so traumatized by the cane. But if you have a brother, a father, or somebody you know, a friend who went to St. Mary's College, they will be talking about that cane. And here it is, a past principal of that school saying to abolish it. And and what grieves me more is that some teachers can tell me, you know, they're not surprised by some of the persons who are talking about the consultation and asking for more time within which to unroll the abolishing of corporal punishment, because some of their very schools are the worst perpetrators of corporal punishment in this country. Shame on you. Shame, 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 shame on you. So much research has been done, not one piece of research that shows that there is long-term positive gains to be had from corporal punishment, especially when it comes to teaching children, whether it is a class lesson or whether it is behavior. That does nobody any good. It just perpetuates a vicious cycle. And somebody asked me, you know, these people who are being beat, are they in jail? No, not all of them. Some of them. Some of them are abused, and some of them are abusers of the worst kind. And so the end result does not always have to be jail. There are worse fits than jail. You could be in your own home, which is supposed to be your sanctuary, and you are in jail. And you are in jail, and you're also the jailer, because you are inflicting what you know on your child, which is violence. Is it any wonder our children are so violent today? This is where we end tonight, but we will have more on the topic next week, I promise you. See you then. Bye-bye. What happens now?